My name is Natalie Callio, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the Professional Research Associate here at the Canadian Centre for the Study of Cooperatives. As we gather in this space from across the country, and I see from across the world, I greet you from where I was born and where I sit today on Treaty 6 territory, land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota for millennia, and also the traditional homeland of the Métis. I acknowledge the privilege of being able to work on this land, raise my child here, share in its bounty, and reflect on its beauty while protecting what makes it beautiful. In these strange days, I reaffirm my commitment and that of our center to its stewardship, to the importance of honor, truth, and the shared, necessary, and very important work of reconciliation. Next, I would like to take this opportunity to speak to the origin of the large cooperative business case project that led us to today's co-op conversation. For those who are not familiar, Ivey Publishing, a division of the Ivey School of Business at Western University, is Canada's leading provider of business case studies and the second in the world, second only to Harvard. So business case studies, for those of you who are familiar may know this, they're very effective pedagogical tools, and Ivey cases are used in 96% of the Economist's top-ranked MBA schools. But while their collection boasts more than 9,000 high-quality cases, there are only 31 co-op-based cases total in the entire repository. So obviously this is something that we would like to rectify. And we know that real-life cases that come out of cooperatives can make highly successful cases in the Ivey Publishing repository. So for instance, Federated Co-operatives Limited Change Management is an Ivey case written by our own Dionne Pohler, one of our two speakers today, and it has been used in business school classrooms around the world 6,000 times. That's an immense amount of exposure to the cooperative model from one single case. Meanwhile, each year, our center administers a survey, Stan will put in a link in the chat, called the Top Co-op Issues Survey, which asks Canadian cooperative leaders to identify their top and most pressing issues facing the sector. And for 9 years in a row, the need to improve awareness of the cooperative model has been the #1 issue. So, how do these come together? When we ask cooperative leaders to make recommendations to address that challenge, year after year, they tell us that business schools, including cooperatives in their curriculum, is key. Yet very few business students graduate having been exposed to any learning on cooperatives. So seeing this gap in opportunity on the Ivey side and a clear need on the co-op side, 2 years ago, we formed a partnership with Ivey Publishing and initiated this project with the goal of increasing the number of high-quality cooperative business cases in Ivey's repository, and thus in business school classrooms around the world, including bringing people who may not have been looking for a co-op case to teaching a compelling business case based on our model. Many cooperative educators, for sure, some in this room, are involved in this great collaborative effort, and many have been involved in past efforts, which Dionne will touch on when she gets to there. This time around, we put our heads down and dedicated the time and resources to building a relationship with Ivey and a consortium of cooperators from around the world to write Ivey publishable, high-quality cooperative cases from Brazil to the Netherlands, from Canada to Mexico. So with some excellent foundational training from Anne Mesny at HSA in 2024, in November, this past November, 25 of us completed Ivey's own case writing training and have since formed a community of practice to work on our cases. And it's working. We have already had 1 case published, 1 is in press, 3 are submitted for Ivey's peer review, 2 drafts in classroom testing, and at least 6 more in production. And we are just getting going. We have the potential to double Ivey's co-op cases by the end of 2026. And two of the key people involved in making this happen are here with me today. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome my collaborators and our speakers today, Violetta Gallagher and Dionne Pohler. So Violetta is the Associate Director of Product and Publishing at Ivey Publishing. She has been absolutely instrumental in this project, and her enthusiasm and commitment has been a constant throughout. She's been our Ivey touchstone and a champion we greatly appreciate. And Dr. Dionne Pohler, my dear friend, colleague, and oft co-conspirator, is our center's CRS chair in cooperative governance and research fellow, as well as associate professor in the Edwards School of Business here at the University of Saskatchewan. I have the privilege of working with both these amazing women, and we three will be having a similar conversation on a world stage at the International Sciences Global Research Conference, which is also the CASC and ACE conference in Montreal in July, in the United Nations Year of the Cooperative. But this conversation with all of you is our debut. So before we hear from Violetta and Dionne, a word on our co-op conversation series. Many of you have been here before. Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, our presenters will talk about the project, case writing, and the case method from their perspectives. Then we'll have a short conversation followed by all of us breaking out into group discussions around a question posed by our speakers for about 15 minutes. So a note on this, we always seem to lose people when we go into the breakout rooms, but before you dash off, know that one thing we hear repeatedly from people in our evaluations of these co-op conversations is how much people actually value these informal opportunities to network. So please stick around. If anyone is experiencing technical difficulties, you can message Stan Yu. Stan, can you give a wave?
Hi, everyone.
And he will be available to assist. We will be recording this session, as you can see, and the link will be shared with everyone who registered after today's conversation. Now over to Violetta and Dionne. I believe Dionne's going to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And I have to sort of say that Natalie has really been the heart of this entire project, both in the background and also actually taking the training and writing her own case. So we're excited. That'll be her debut case writing as well. So I just wanted to start with just a little bit of sort of context about how and why I care so much about this project. So as some of you might be aware, who know me, others don't, I grew up in a small, outside of a small town on a farm, rural Saskatchewan, called Spalding. And, you know, I often say that the only businesses we had there were the local co-op grocery store, the credit union. You know, we lost our school when I was, you know, kind of just finishing high school. And so the town has really effectively lost almost all its services, still has access to some of those services provided by cooperatives. But there was always this sort of sense that we knew that cooperatives and credit unions were incredibly important, especially to areas where we didn't have access to goods and services. But also in Saskatchewan, even moving to the cities, you know, co-op is sort of everywhere. Cooperatives are everywhere. And it sort of becomes just this, like your fish in water. You know they exist, but you don't necessarily think about them that much in systematic ways. But so anyways, that was me when I was growing up. I went away to university. I actually did all my education in business schools. I did sort of have a start in pre-journalism at the University of Regina, but ended up, you know, wanting to be an accountant. And so I actually transferred pretty quickly into the business administration program there. I transferred to Dalhousie University, finished my degree in commerce there in Halifax, and then eventually to the University of Alberta School of Business, where I did my PhD in business. And all throughout my business school education, and even when I was as a PhD student and candidate, I was actually teaching introductory business classes. I was really struck by the lack of cases on cooperatives in business schools. Most of the case studies that I had in my classes, or that I then used in subsequent classes I taught very early in my career, were on large investor-owned firms, predominantly US-based even, Microsoft, Apple, Lincoln Electric, Southwest Airlines. And also I'll say that when I so there wasn't this, this big emphasis in business schools on cooperatives. But also the other interesting thing is when I entered my PhD or applied to be accepted into the PhD program at the University of Alberta, I sort of, in my research proposal, said I'd really like to understand cooperatives. How do they form? How do they survive? What makes them tick? What makes them struggle? Just understand this interesting organizational form that I knew was different because of how and where I grew up, but I didn't really know how or why it mattered. But what was really interesting is I got rejected in my first application because there was, I got a feedback later when I actually did get accepted to the program from a faculty member who said, it was really strange that you wrote that you wanted to study co-ops. No one was interested in supervising that topic because, Dionne, nobody really cares about cooperatives. And I think this is really interesting because actually it's very timely. A colleague of mine at the Edwards School of Business just this morning forwarded me an article that just was published a few days ago in a management journal. I have a link. I'll put it actually in right now into the chat, called Cooperatives in Business Schools, Why the Disconnect. And so this is it's an actual sort of issue that people are starting to talk about and think about more. So it was really timely for today. But I picked out, there's one or two sentences I want to just highlight from this article. So the Academy of Management is the world's largest scholarly gathering of management academics, management and business school academics. And they gather yearly at an annual meeting where people present papers. And a few years ago, this paper that I posted in the chat, they did a study of how many of their sessions, of their 1,400 sessions that year, with more than 5,000 articles presented. There are sometimes up to 10,000 academics at these conferences from 120 countries around the world. They looked at how many were linked to co-ops. So out of 1,400 sessions, there was one session even remotely related to co-ops. And out of the 5,000 articles presented, only one actually had co-ops in its abstract. And so this is just a couple of years ago, and I'm sure it's not really fundamentally changed that much. And the top academic journal in business schools is the Academy of Management Journal. And in the last 20 years, they did a study of this journal and found that they were only able to identify 3 articles exploring co-op organizations. So I wanted to say that this, even when I was entering my PhD program in 2005 and had this sort of, it's the same, people keep talking about this issue. And so I ended up studying something completely different. I focused on the impact of collective action of workers and how unions impact organizations' profitability and workers' outcomes. But then years later, after I finished my PhD, I got my first job at the Edwards School of Business at the University of Saskatchewan. And I connected with some scholars at the time, what was called the Center for the Study of Cooperatives. And it was really interesting. It was the first time I realized that people actually do study cooperatives in academia, and that I actually could study something that I had long had an interest in. And so I connected to many of these scholars, and that's really what started my passion for cooperative research and education. So early in my involvement in the center, one of the things that we often had discussions about was how to engage more business school faculty and students in learning about, studying, understanding the cooperative model. And recognizing one of the things that we were studying at the Co-op Center at the time was many cooperatives that were successful, but also many that had failed. And one of the things we identified is there's a recognition of challenges in cooperatives where a ton of people come in and lead co-ops who don't understand how cooperatives are different. They come out of business schools with no training or understanding of cooperatives, but also the opposite is true. Sometimes you have people who really understand cooperatives end up in, leading and running cooperatives who don't have a lot of knowledge about basic business, accounting, law, management principles. And so the challenge can work both ways, right? We need more people who understand co-ops to learn about, basic business concepts and principles and get that kind of education. But we also need people in business schools who are learning about this different organizational form. And so that was sort of a conversation we started to have. And one of the ideas we had, and the inception of this idea happened, I think it was now probably 10 years ago, where we said, one of the ways we can do this is by trying to get more cases published on cooperatives that are used in business schools, in their actual classrooms, in law schools, in accounting classes, in HR classes, in strategy classes. And so we started this effort for a couple of us at the Co-op Center. And for those of you who know the Co-op Center, we are always we pack a bigger punch for the number of people we have involved in our Co-op Center. But we were trying to write all of these cases ourselves, and just with everything we had going on, we were unable to kind of move this forward without any also students who were really focused on studying cooperatives at the time to help us with this effort. And so it kind of fizzled out. And then I actually went to a different university for a while and came back. And a few years ago, several of us at the Co-op Center talked about reigniting this project, but we talked about how and why we hadn't been successful in the first iteration of it. And one of the things we identified was that we really needed to focus on getting a broader network of people who were already studying co-ops, who were writing cooperative cases, but didn't understand or know how to actually put them in a format that then they would get picked up by people studying all kinds of disciplinary topics in business schools and law schools and all of the professional schools where business training and legal training and those kinds of things are done. And so that's actually also to them when Natalie really joined the project and started the discussions with Ivey Publishing. And so I just wanted to give that background and sort of some framework for why I got involved and sort of where we're at now to frame the conversation for Violetta to talk about what is Ivey Publishing and how Ivey has been following us with this journey much more closely in this recent round where we've been trying to increase the number of business cases. So I'll turn over to Violetta and then we'll have a discussion after.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie, for the invitation. And thank you, everyone, for joining and Dionne. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ivey Publishing if you don't know it yet. We are a global leader in business case studies that are transforming the business education in the way that it's delivered around the world. So a little bit about Ivey Publishing. I'll speak to a little bit about cases and what they are, just in case you're not familiar with it. My own personal experience for the last couple of years is speaking to Natalie, and then we move forward with that. So at Ivey Publishing, our collection features over 9,000 high-quality cases, as Natalie had mentioned. We add about 30 newly published cases each month, and these cases are crafted by more than 8,000 published authors from 55 countries all over the world. Quite an impressive number, but yet we are still talking about 31 cases that are in the collection about co-ops. So truly reaching an international audience with 168 countries and content available in 12 languages. We distribute our cases through Harvard Business Publishing and other global partners, and ensuring that we all are accessible to educators and learners worldwide. We are focused on the business education in many disciplines of about 12 different disciplines around the world. So in addition to our own cases, we also supply our cases from partner institutions around the world, and this really expands our repository with diverse perspectives and expertise. Though this global reach and continual growth reflection on our commitment to delivering real-world insights and up-to-date educational tools. So a little bit about, what is exactly a case? A case for us is a detailed description of a real challenge, an opportunity, a problem, or decision faced by an individual or group. Each case is written with a specific educational objectives or learning objectives in mind, and they contain all the information and the data that are available to the key decision makers at the time. This format allows learners to step into that real-world scenario and build that empathy for that protagonist, and the analysis of the complex business situations and develop effective strategies in practical and engaging ways. The key is engaging. And really for myself, I'd also like to share on a personal note, when I first encountered the world of cooperatives, especially in Canada, my knowledge was quite limited. I thought of a Libro Bank. However, as I started exploring the rich and diverse cases published, although 31, I discovered not only a vast repository of business wisdom, but also the unique dynamics of cooperative enterprises. And this is, I think, key to what Dionne has just mentioned. These cases are significantly deep into my understanding, and they honestly sparked a genuine interest in the challenges and opportunities within the cooperative sector. So today, I think we're not just celebrating the size of our global case collection, we're also highlighting an exciting initiative to fill a key gap in business education, and that is cooperative business cases. So even with our extensive library, there has been surprising few cases focused on the cooperative model, and seeing an opportunity to change that is why we've teamed up with experts, with Natalie, with the Co-op Association and educators to develop high quality cases that showcase that unique challenge and successes of cooperatives. So over to you, Natalie.
You're on mute, Natalie.
Thanks so much. That was great. I have a quick question before we move into breakouts, because there have been so many attempts at this, and there are lots of great co-op cases like descriptive and things and others, but what do you think is behind the success of this effort to get more cooperative focused business cases written for and published by Ivey?
I can start off there. So at Ivey Publishing, we've always focused on big brands, Amazon, Tesla, and the like. But as we take a strategic step forward, we recognize the importance of representing cooperatives in our own collection, especially as a Canadian-based company and cooperatives within Canada. They, as mentioned by Dionne and others, they play a crucial role in Canada's economy, and they are contributing to sectors like agriculture, retail, finance, and housing. And so I think they prioritize community ownership, that decision-making, and long-term sustainability. And these are values that are increasingly relevant in today's business landscape, especially today. So given global economic shifts and a renewed focus on ethical and inclusive business models, I think this is now the time where we bring in more co-op cases into the conversation, especially into the classroom. So it's not just about writing the case, it's about that usage and why that 6,000 usage number for that one individual case and the great impact that it makes. It's also why we're actively supporting authors in developing these cases. So our editorial team provides feedback, and our academic reviewers work through a rigorous double-blind process to ensure high-quality publications. So by expanding our co-op case collection, we're not only filling that gap, but we're also helping educators and students explore those alternative business models that I think really drive impact.
And I would just add two things. One is that I'm thrilled to hear that Ivey's strategic focus on these kinds of cases has become much more pronounced in recent years. I think the same thing can be said for the University of Saskatchewan and universities writ large, especially around sort of the desire to understand social economy organizations align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The University of Saskatchewan now has a new signature research area called Communities and Sustainability, and the Co-op Center is integrally involved in that. The Edwards School of Business has a focus on this kind of social impact in addition, or coupled with that, you have to recognize that they're not separable, economic and social impact. And so I think that there's been a strategic shift in universities and business schools to also care more about these kinds of organizations and try and understand them. And I think the other thing, though, I'll be blunt, one of the challenges we've had is that business school faculty know how to write these engaging cases and teach them because this is what they do. This is how their programs have been structured. Many co-op academics have not historically been stationed or centered in business schools. And so the challenge is that the cases that co-op scholars often write are very descriptive, lengthy, meant to convey deep academic theory for their readers. They're really written for other scholars and not for students. And so I love that Violetta emphasized engaging. That I think is so critical. And that's why we spent so much time this time on bringing co-op scholars into training to learn how to write these kinds of cases, because they are fundamentally different than the kinds of cases I think that academics are used to writing, and especially co-op academics. So I feel like we're having more success now too, because we've recognized that people didn't just naturally have these skills. And then with Violetta saying Ivey is now being much more supportive in helping shape the cases rather than rejecting them outright if they don't fit in the right form, but they see some potential there. We can work with people to actually help get them published.
Thanks. I just want to mention one of the things, my favorite parts of where we're at right now is also we've set up like an hour a month where anybody in the consortium can come and have other, like it's like a peer workshop, so that we have a place to talk through some of our issues with our cases before we even get to the point of submitting them. So it's an exciting initiative, and I'm so thankful to both of you for everything you've done to make it happen, and we just need to keep going. But now we want to hear from you, because these co-op conversations are meant to be an opportunity for people to socialize a bit. We'd like you, when Stan breaks you out into rooms, we want you to introduce yourself, tell others what co-op you're from, just a little bit about like where you're positioned, and what brought you to this particular conversation today. And the question that we would like you to discuss, which was brought up by Violetta and Dionne, is because everybody's from across the board. There will be educators and practitioners and members. So what kinds of business decisions in the co-ops you've studied or worked in or been involved with would make compelling cases for business students to learn from, and why? So that's your question. And then we'll reconvene here and wrap it up with some final thoughts and some information about upcoming events. Thanks.
How much time would you like the breakout session here there, Natalie?
I think
10 minutes.
For 15, I think we could do today.
All right. Breakout groups starting right now.
Thanks, Dan. That I don't know how everyone else did, but we covered in that short period of time everything from small credit unions merging and member reaction to that, and ag co-ops that get too big and then fail. Yeah, like it was a really great conversation with people literally from all over the world. So, Stan, are there any questions? Does anyone have any burning thoughts?
I wanted to call, like, sorry, Anna, I know I said, but I want to put Anna on the spot because Anna's actually in a law school, which is another professional school that also needs like more like people who learn about co-ops. And so Anna made some observations. I think is still kind of, because actually, Anna, why don't you just say like what you had kind of.
Well, first I made Dionne tell me what a case study was, because it means something different in a law school. But I really see a value for case studies in law schools. In law schools, we spend a lot of time reading court decisions, and those are sort of like a case study. But, you know, there's only certain things that end up with court decisions, and they usually tend to be sort of extreme or unusual cases. And a lot of what lawyers are asked to do, you know, in-house counsel, giving legal advice to co-ops, transactional work, is really hard to teach through cases, because cases only deal with those situations where they've gone really wrong. So once Dionne explained what a case study was to me, I thought like, oh, I can really see that being valuable for getting law students thinking more broadly about the kinds of roles that they might be asked to play and the sorts of legal advice that they might be asked to give.
Right.
Violetta, actually, go ahead, Mark.
No, finish. You're going to follow up, so go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask Violetta, because like one thing I know Ivey is really focused on business schools. I know it does have some legal adjacent and regulatory kinds of cases. one of the things that would be, like we have a required business law class in our, and most business schools actually do have a required core business law class for all of our undergrad students. And so like, I can imagine there being a space for there to be cases there. But I also am just like wondering, is the law or the like regulatory policy or these kinds of things a big area for Ivey? And would it want more cases on that?
So in the short end, yes. But it's interesting, right? Because business case studies come from Harvard Law. So 100 years ago, it was in the law department at Harvard that they then said, okay, well, we're going to bring this into business, this concept of case studies into business. And that's how it all started, was actually from the law department. And so it's interesting because that's the one thing that business case studies kind of bring in, that empathy, bring in a protagonist, bring in that role play, and that's why they become engaging. And really, there is no right or wrong answer. It is, how do you use the concepts, the theory, the framework in order to develop that learning objectives and those learning outcomes from the students. And one thing that we have worked with in the past was with our medical department here at I'm at Western. Ivey's attached to the University of Western Ontario, or Western University as it's now known. And so we've worked with Schulich from the medical department and bringing in empathy to some of these individuals, and not just the case that's at present, but what has happened with the patient beforehand. We've also have published a few cases in conjunction with our engineering department. And same sort of, approach is, okay, great, we can, answer A and B, but how do we teach these engineers to have those decision-making skills? And so law is one of those things where it just naturally flows. Do we have a lot of examples? Definitely not. And I would say definitely not one around co-op, but not saying that we never would, because it is a natural fit for a business case study, is bringing that in. So Anna, if you, want to partner with someone and write a case, we would be glad to publish it and make it one of our first.
Part of the problem might be that lawyers aren't very engaging. Dionne also said that was important.
Engagement is one of them, probably the most critical. We have a few aspects of, what makes a great case, and engagement is one, but that comes in many different forms and ways. So, yeah.
Feel free to contact us, Anna. Marc-Andre?
I just want to share, Daniel, I'm going to share your idea because I thought it was really neat. The idea of a case that's anchored around this kind of really important difference between cooperatives and other firms, which is that, in a publicly traded firm, you often have an investor relations department, and they have to interact with their, the shareholders. But in cooperatives, you tend to have like a member relation or stakeholder relation role, because they don't have that same shareholder relationship. It's very different role. And I'm just wondering if that's something like, obviously you need a good decision point and a good protagonist, but it's a really neat role. Like you're basically a community builder, and you're engaged in all sorts of really neat conversations, and there'd probably be 1,000 decisions you have to make. Is that something that comes up at all, Violetta?
Yes, so I'm so excited that you said that. So one thing, we have cases, and cases is our bread and butter, but we have exercises, notes, and role plays. And how perfect would that lead into a role play discussion? Because it is such a different perspective that you're taking, and different negotiation tactics. And a role play can be in, in negotiations, it can be in HR, it can be many different disciplines. And it's funny, it connects back to the conversation we had with Isabel and John. And what I really felt was key and made me reflect on was, this patient's capital, as a co-ops, and this self-governance and the community building. And that would lead so well into a role play, because often enough, and I could say this for our undergrad student population here at Ivey, is they're thinking, how quickly can I become like the next CEO and make the next big buck and into that fast capital. And so taking a different approach to that, it would lead so well into a great role play.
Great, role plays are a great idea.
Yeah.
Before I jump into to our upcoming events and things, does anyone have any other questions? Or you can always email me or Stan later too, and we can make sure they get to the right place. But Violetta, before we move on to CCSC stuff, can you just give us a little preview of what we were talking about before, of the exciting development that happened this morning on the Ivey side?
Yeah, so after this conversation, we'll get the recording, and on our iveypublishing.ca website, we'll have a special spot in under events that will have the link out to this recording. We'll have a little bit more information about the conference that Natalie will speak to, but most importantly, the current case collection that we have, and we'll continue to update that case collection. And so in order to access the cases, we just ask that you register for an account. We will then approve the account within 24 hours, and you have access to the cases. So you can find inspection copies available on the website, and then the teaching notes that go along with it. So we will, Natalie and Stan will share that out, and we'll send that out through our network as well.
So exciting. This is just another example of the incredible collaboration that we've enjoyed, mostly through Violetta. So upcoming events, we are jam-packed with them, but I'm just going to mention a couple. Next Tuesday, you are invited to join us for a special hybrid event, so everyone can attend. It's called Preparing for the Singularity, and the topic is building a systematically resilient and fair economy for a world of artificial superintelligence. This is featuring Dr. Kirsten Wright, who is the Managing Director of the Waterloo Institute for Complexity and Innovation and the USask Research Communities and Sustainability Signatory Visiting Scholar. Dionne mentioned that signatory earlier. So in this talk, Kirsten will explore ideas to build a resilient society anchored around strategic policy interventions that could actually help tip us into a society with more shared ownership, like cooperatives, and a recentering of place-based rural economies. So Stan has shared the link, and you can join us virtually via the live stream, or you can come and see us in person if you are in Saskatoon at the Diefenbaker building at 101 Diefenbaker Place. So that's at 3 o'clock Saskatchewan time on Tuesday. And our May co-op conversation will be announced very soon. So please stay tuned to our socials and our website for that announcement. And yeah, I just, I also put the link to the ICA-CCR ACE CASC conference, which is it's the International Year of the Cooperatives conference that's happening in Montreal this summer. So thank you all very much for this conversation. I really appreciated it. And please send us any questions or feedback, and have a great day.